Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else. This is guest number 10, Quinn Curnow, and she is a sculptor, an illustrator, and a painter, and I think a lot of other forms of art that you work with. I don't know really where the spectrum begins and ends, but I think you do a lot of things that we could cover. And Quinn has been making, I would, from my perspective, I would say like fun and exuberant, highly, in my view, kind of femininely charged artwork with this beautiful feminine energy to it. I'm trying to like find the words that accurately capture what you do.
No,
And
please go on. It's so, I mean, I feel like you probably know this too. It is so helpful when other people tell you what you are because you're like, I don't fucking know.
so that's basically what I've like distilled it down to, is like this beautiful kind of hyper energetic, feminine, and like confident art. It's like balancing femininity and confidence, and some of your beasts maybe kind of go into that masculinity a little bit, like the snake with the feet and such. But I generally find this kind of exciting, sort of like uplifting feminine energy. And I think that's what I find so interesting about your work, is like I tend to lean a little bit more into kind of darker and gritty things, or like a little bit spooky sometimes. And your stuff is so like warm and heartfelt, and just uplifting is really kind of the word I would use to describe it.
Yeah, kawaii. Like really though, I mean, it's really funny because that is very true. And the kind of the look that everything I inevitably touch has, it's always been there. And I mean, I don't know if it was because I was raised by the television and just like cartoons. But I used to hate it. And it's like a lot of my friends joke about how like I have a friend who will send me every meme where you see like the pastel girl next to the goth girl, where it's like my outsides, my insides, because I I don't see myself that way, but then inevitably what comes out, it has that like candy coated cartoon feel. And I used to hate that so much. I was bitter about it. But I have, I'm almost 38. I'll be 38 this year. And so it's like, fuck it, time to embrace. And also, I feel like the biggest thing that I've learned about creativity, not to like steal your questions or thunder, but
No, keep going.
it doesn't belong to me. Like, it's not even mine. Like, I'm just this portal and it comes out of me. So I can't judge it. And I stopped judging it. And I stopped like feeling like it's supposed to say or do or something that it doesn't say or do.
I think that's it's very insightful and inspiring, because it takes a lot of the pressure off of having to fit in a certain lane, and it just lets kind of the natural stuff percolate to the surface and come out to the world as it should. But I think that's a great philosophy to go by there, to not judge it, even if even if you kind of inherently don't like it, to let it still come to fruition in a way.
Oh, I mean, full disclosure, sometimes I don't even like the stuff I make. I'm like, I don't know that I enjoy that. I don't know that I would buy it, but I liked making it.
Yeah.
And then it makes somebody else happy in a different way, which is funny to me because I'm like, okay, it's meaningful to you. It's like you pass it on.
I think it can be kind of exhausting getting to the end of that process too. The process can be such fun. And then maybe once I've gotten some of my stuff out, sometimes by the end of it, it feels like you can't look at it anymore. because you're kind of tapped out on it, all gassed out. So I think that that's like something I face a lot, where it's like you feel like you've made a real treasure, but like you're just over it completely. And so it's not bad, but you're kind of jaded about it. And so like therefore there's like this reluctance to really like talk about it enthusiastically, or go sell yourself to the world kind of thing.
Oh my God. The selling of the things is my most loathed part. I mean, not necessarily in an in-person scenario, because I have that kind of like service industry background professionally.
Yeah.
So I like connecting. Like that's the thing that I love the most. And that's really kind of what sales are at the end of the day. But like online, for example, where you kind of have to like have a vocabulary and a narrative and an agenda. And I don't have that background. And I'm not interested in creating that necessarily, because I find it so
Yeah.
unappealing, and just like it doesn't, I don't value it, I guess is the best way to say it, you know?
Are you kind of referring to like the marketing of Instagram and tagging all your products and hashtag and add music and edit it down and bring it into iMovie and create 6 ads so that people will pay attention and the algorithm won't ignore you, that kind of work?
Yes. And I think that it's hard, because it's like there's a balance that I'm trying to assess for myself personally right now, because I really do not, I mean, my kind of social media presence is just more like organic. It's like things that I think are funny, or that like I just like with the art, it's like, well, I had a fun time like making that video of that, or I have an idea for a picture. And so it's, but I'm not good at that. Like, I think it's like this gift and curse. You probably know about it because you have, you know, a small child, and they're so present in the moment. And that's very much like how I operate. And it's great, but it's not ideal for creating those kinds of structures. Like, this is my marketing plan, and now I will 5-point you on this product and continue to explain it to you about why it's good. Like,
Right.
yeah.
It's a different it feels like a different personality entirely, that like a lot of artists and creatives are just like, I'm not willing to like change who I am to be this I don't know, it almost fits in a lot with like that sort of corporate culture. And I think that's why it's like there's this like cringeworthy factor to it that's like, oh man, I just want to create and have it be captured, or documented without me having to put so much back thought behind it. And that's a big discussion that China and I have had recently. So maybe you've noticed, maybe not, maybe it hasn't been enough time, but like in the last week or so, I've been able to post more because we kind of worked out a new system where, because I'm like, I can't film myself trying to do stuff. It's just impossible. And like the best moments when I'm kind of flowing, it's just so, I don't want to tripod it up and so all that stuff. So I came up with a system where I just
Yes,
send her, she
yes.
works from home now. And
Oh,
so I
that's
send her,
terrific.
yeah. But a lot of times we thought that, oh, that'll work perfectly. You can kind of document my creative process, and that way I don't have to overthink it. But it still wasn't working out for a while. So just this last week, I kind of devised a different system where she'll be in calls for her work and not really know that I'm in the middle of something creative. So I'll send her a little text message of an eyeball emoji, and she'll know that means like, oh, I'll come in and record a couple seconds of what you're doing.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I know.
That's so incredible.
So that is right now my solution to the problem you're talking about, but not everyone has such a wonderful like situation like that. So I do.
I feel that way about my product photos, because my partner is a professional photographer and a product photographer. And so he takes all of my like actual product photos and on model photos. Like I
Yeah.
do the video, obviously you can It's a pretty big disparity in the quality. But when stuff like comes onto the website and is being photographed, it's his skill set that I'm like reaping the benefits of. I mean,
Yeah.
really the truth is, like you're saying, flow state and planning and marketing and filming and capturing, all of those, and whatever it takes also to like find flow, those are all different headspaces. Like they're all
Yeah.
different jobs.
Right. And usually just a totally thankless, payless one in the end. Like, you can get it all right, document it all, create, and then like at the end of the day, people still might not buy your creation or like support it in a viable way. And sometimes
Girl,
they
that's
do.
literally what's happening with my raffle right now. I have this like insanely detailed piece that I'm in love with and I'm
The
raffling
Juno
it.
Birch one.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
was,
I love that one.
thank
Like,
you.
that really got me kind of hooked and interested in your art. I saw the blue skin and the crystal on the head and stuff, and the eyebrows. Like,
I'm
and I love
obsessed.
the gloves. Everything about it, I honestly loved. So I was
Yeah,
a little
I feel
bit
like it's the
actually.
truest thing to me too. It's like it's wonderful to hear you say that, because like for me it feels like that's the truest, maybe like the most joy that I've felt in creating recently, or like the most recent finished thing, I guess I should say, is that. And so
Yeah,
I've been like very excited to be like, yay, and it's in a show and whatever. And this bitch is gonna come to town and I'm gonna promote it on the internet and maybe raise money and maybe make money with like maybe just a crumb of money, please.
that's honestly why I was a little sad to see that you were raffling it off, because I was like, that deserves to be like, I think that like deserves a pretty generous price tag on it. Like, I think I saw you put all that work into it and it looks really cool and beautiful. And like,
Thank you.
so, I mean,
Thank
that's
you.
totally, I know it's for a good cause for the trans lives, right? Or,
Yeah, it's for like a trans lifeline, which is it's basically a nonprofit that runs a hotline and a direct outreach to help people who need to make rent or for whatever they need. Just basically trans people in need getting direct outreach in a confidential way where it's like, you can come here, we will help you get money, we will help you with counseling. Um, but so far, the tickets are not flying out as I might have hoped. Because it's funny with raffles, I've had really good successes and I've had some like not so much ones.
yeah,
It seems like a not so much one. But in my heart of hearts, honestly, like we were talking about, I just want the piece to like leave me and go out into the world.
you
I
want to hold on to it?
No, I'm not that way in general. Like for a lot of years, my partner and I, we met when we worked in national parks. We traveled a lot, went abroad and kind of lived this like seasonal lifestyle. And even now we live in a very small 1 bedroom place that it's like, that's where we live, that's where we work. And so I'm just somebody who is always getting rid of everything. I'm like, get rid of it. I don't want it. I don't need it. Unless it's very like sentimental or precious, but there are only a handful of things that are like that to me, really. I'm not a sentimental person generally, especially with my art. And I'm forgetful because I smoke a lot of weed. So I forget everything that I make. I'm like, oh yeah, forgot I did that.
I'll say, Quinn, that was when I felt comfortable when I had met you, when you were saying something about you were waiting to go take a smoke of a joint or something at the night market. And then I was like, oh, thank God, like I'm in good company now. I can, feel at ease here. There's always something, there's always like a little bit of tension if, somebody's like, oh, like don't smoke or I'm against it. There's always this like slight feeling of being judged that I just make up for myself. So whenever
Are
I'm
you
around
from
people who
the
do, I
Pacific
always feel a little
Northwest?
less judged. What?
Yeah. Yeah, no, not judged at all. Embraced. Are you from the Pacific Northwest?
No, I'm from Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it does because I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Iowa originally, and
Mm,
I feel like that like feeling of like, you pothead, get out of here. You're gonna ruin your life. Like it does increase as you go back that way more and more.
yeah.
But I've been out here a long time and I know that I'm very spoiled now because I'm like, I forget that it's not socially acceptable at all times and in all places.
I know, yeah. It's not like that in every state, but Oregon is.
Yeah, Idaho's insane. You go a few hours and I mean they'll lock you up and throw away the key.
Oh, damn. That's, yeah. Yeah, I still like kind of flinch when I'm near cops just for like just conditioned to do so.
The cops, because that's the correct response.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask you, I kind of, as I do with everybody, I always call it like social media stalking, but it's not that creepy. But I kind of went back in time and sort of looked through your stuff just to see sort of your history. And I noticed that like, well, one, you kind of went public with your art, at least through Instagram in 2016. I was curious if there was like a kind of build up before that that was happening in a not so public way where you were still creating, or if you were doing it in a business capacity. And then the second question kind of branched off of that is like, objectively, what I noticed was like there was just a gigantic change between 2016 and 2017 with like your output. And it seemed like your like technical skills and discipline seemed to really blossom in the following year. So just from, I don't know what I noticed, I saw your hands were looking really good in some in the one where you're filling in the black background with black. Just the hands looked anatomically like, it just looked like things were sort of progressing and growing, and it looked like you had sort of like a renaissance, so to speak, or artistic revolution. So I kind of wanted to ask about that, if there was anything you could remember being such a significant change between 2016 and 2017.
Yeah, well, the truth is that I've always been an artist, always. Like it predates my own memories. My mom saved stuff that I made that I have no recollection of making. That's like, she's like, you were two. And I was like, that's pretty good for two. And that was just like my narrative. I drew that I was like the arty kid. And then when I turned 18, like I wanted to leave Iowa and go as far away as possible. Like that was my impulse from that time and space in my life. And I went to Germany and I was an au pair. And I was like convinced that my destiny in the world was to move to Europe and be an artist. Like I was like, that's what I'm doing. I'm moving to Europe and I'm going to be an artist. And I'm not going to say that I'm not unconvinced of that now. Maybe more convinced than ever.
It might be, yeah, you might be right in the middle of that plan.
I certainly hope so. I said to my husband today, I'm like, we have to leave before it's the road. Okay. I don't own a gun, so I'm not ready. But I think, so basically like reality slapped me in the face when I was there. And I
What was
did
that
not
reality?
immigrate to Europe.
The
What's that?
finances? What was so real about it that slapped you?
Well, I stayed for a year as an au pair and I met someone at that time and I started dating that person and then I tried to like emigrate. So I lived in total for about 2.5 years in Germany. And the whole time I was trying to immigrate, like I was an unskilled 19-year-old who was like, didn't understand anything about what the possibilities were over there. And you know, as it's just like there's a reason that you don't hear the word emigrate very often. It's hard to do. Mm-hmm. And there were no prospects. And they basically, the government was like, no, you can't stay. We're going to deport you. And it was, I kind of realized like, oh, I can't just be an artist. Like that's not a thing. And I didn't really have a job. So anyway, long story short, I ended up back in my parents' house and just was sort of like, okay, well, I guess I need to grow up a little bit and I need to figure out how to pay for myself in the world. And as a long time result of that. Like I worked in the service industry. I had a fabulous time. I traveled a lot. I did and saw a lot of things, but the art part, like the part of how I just like was always drawing all day, every day, it went away. It dried up because I became scared of it. I was really, really frightened of making art, of what people might think of my art, of the idea that my art wasn't good enough because I'd tried and I'd failed a little bit.
What was the period where it kind of dried up for you?
About 10 years, I would say, between like 2005 until at about 2015. I was not having the greatest time ever in 2015. Like I was living my life, whatever. I had my cute job and my cute friends, but I knew that I was supremely unhappy with the fact that I couldn't create like I knew I was supposed to. And it felt like this like buildup that was driving me crazy. And
What were you doing at that time that was kind of filling all your time?
The traveling was like, it was like in the 10 years where I was sort of artistically blocked, my priority was only to travel. So I'd like work and save all my money, and then I'd like fuck off for 6 months and would
Yeah.
go wherever and be in South America or yeah. So that was, and it worked for a long time because those like trips were so, intense, and it just felt like this sort of same rush and flow of presence and I don't know, curiosity maybe that I missed, that at some point like it didn't really work the same anymore. And
Did
I
every place
found
just start to feel like the same place in a way? Or
it
how did
started to feel like I wasn't taking advantage of being in those places. Like
Hmm.
it was like, okay, I'm here and I don't feel any, wherever you go, there you are. It's like I'm here and I don't feel any different. So what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And that's when I started to kind of turn the lens back on the inside. And I mean, I don't know what else to say. It sounds so stupid whenever I say it out loud, but it's like art is like a calling. I've always known that's what I'm supposed to do. And for a lot of that time where I wasn't doing it, it really was because I was really afraid of it, because I knew that if I did it, that I'd be taking myself seriously. Oh, hi, Chucky. Hello, puppy. Are you allowed back inside now?
Hi, Chucky.
He might have to go in his kennel because sometimes he is not a very good phone dog.
Okay, well, he's welcome to be a part of this.
But yeah, I think that at that point, like there was a buildup in my life and I basically like couldn't take it anymore. And so I was trying and struggling to create, and all of the time I spent creating felt very like frustrating. And not that it doesn't feel that way now. I think more I've learned like to let it go when it feels that way, that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went and saw a therapist for about a year, and that was very helpful. I went to Spain alone for about 8 weeks. That helped a lot. And then I just decided to come back and actually like stay put in my life for a second and try doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing. And I feel like I'm in the beginning of trying that and doing that.
Do you think it's possible that those things go hand in hand? Traveling kind of inhibits art, and more of a sedentary life sort of lets one be a little bit more prolific and create more often.
I mean, there are all those like romantic painters who paint up plein air, and they're
True.
I mean, I guess what I've discovered for me is that because for me, art is this internal portal, that the shrinking does help me. Like I'm saying, like getting rid of stuff, that helps me. Letting the work go, that helps me. Yeah. I think that like having a really sort of a boring life, that helps me. I don't, I worked in service for a long time. I traveled for a long time. And when I would like travel and work in service. So my partner and I worked in national parks. And that felt like a lot of action. And now I love just like having the most regimented little life in some ways. Like I just walk my dog, and I started nannying for my neighbors, and that's been a huge boon to my creativity. I feel like being around kids it's been so enriching again. I feel like I'm just like sucking up their energy.
I absolutely feel that. Yeah, I see things in like such a fresh and refreshed way. Um, I talk about it almost every day with China, just saying how like Lucas helps me to re-experience uh, just those novel first wonders of life. Like it makes me almost well up a little bit, like when I sort of have this recognition that like I forgot how fun this thing was. Like for all these years, like how dare I, like how could I have forgotten how fun I don't know, chasing him around is. And like it's sort of this deep recognition of like, oh, I've been neglecting my own inner child for a long time in different ways. And but it feels so good to sort of like scrape that rust off of my old rusty heart. Not that it's all cold and hard, but it's just like, I don't know, the playful nature of kids, how there's no importance to their playing, there's no agenda to it. I love that. It's so cool.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it is. It's pure consciousness without the shroud of the ego.
I mean, kids can have the ego too. They can
I mean, they've got the id. They definitely have the id. I think they've got and that's what it, I mean, that's essentially what childhood is. It's like developing your ego. Then you go through puberty and it gets like, you know, sanded down and like ground into like a fine weaponized point.
are
Middle school.
you saying that you become humbled through the process of puberty?
I think so. I mean, I think that's part of the like you have to. I think that's part of the like breaking away from your parents and getting independent. I think that like fortifying your ego as an adolescent is necessary. I think that I've come to see that, especially as like I've gotten older, it's like, okay, and now we've turned a corner and it's time to deconstruct the ego. And that seems like it's probably going to be the rest of time.
Pretty much.
and building new iterations of ideas about egos, are like kind of like how Bowie did. Like this is the phase that I want to embody. I love that idea. And I love when someone sees like with clarity, get out of here, Chuck.
Like playing characters almost with oneself.
Yeah, or epochs or time periods. Like that's very romantic. The idea of like living long enough and making art long enough to be able to like look back and be like, oh yes, this was my yellow hat phase. I don't know. Chuck, get out of here or you're gonna go in your kennel.
I bet you could look back and already spot some of those eras for yourself. I feel as though I have already recognized different phases, and like that's actually sort of that's a good topic right there just to talk about as artists, is like that kind of crushing feeling when you've built up a brand or something and then you're just sick of it, or like you're like, I don't even know if that's me anymore.
I don't
Like,
want to do that
maybe I
anymore.
already ran its course basically. And Dream Shark is the closest sort of thread of like who I am, I guess, that I've been able to sort of bring forth and like culminate all that I want through a single sort of point. But even that, like sometimes I find myself being like, was that just meant to be a year or two or three, and then close that book up and move on? And
Where
then
did you get that name?
it's I've had dreams about sharks like my whole life. So I wrote up a little short story I don't know if it's kind of hidden on the website or not because it's a little scary, but it's a retelling of my first nightmare that I can remember. Um, so I'm from Cape Cod, and there's a lot of bridges there. Cape Cod's actually a peninsula, so it's not attached to the mainland except by bridges. So like bridges were a big part of growing up, and there's a canal underneath it that's like ocean water. And so when I was real young, like 5 or 6, I had this dream that it was like a gray, hazy sort of day, and there was just sort of like panic in the air, or like this distressed feeling that my family had, and the bridge like seemed to be collapsing, and there was a little teeny tiny raft or boat down below, and my family insisted that we needed to jump down to the raft right away. So they all go plummeting down, and I'm just thinking, I'm a little kid. I'm going to get taken by the wind like a piece of paper. This is scary. Like, I don't want to jump. And I'm just up there alone. And so I'm jumping off, kind of just commit to it. And then I'm jumping down, and out of the water emerges a giant great white shark's mouth that opens up and just swallows me whole, or takes a big chomp down. And that's when I, burst open awake. And so that's like a very formative kind of nightmare for me that has just always carried through the years. And I've just had a collection of other kind of spooky shark dreams like that when I was a kid. And I've dream journaled about it over the years, trying to kind of dissect the symbolism of what the shark means. And generally, I find that it's some sort of foreboding, kind of like a sign of danger is coming. And if I had to interpret that dream, I mean, my parents divorced when I was 3. It could be some sort of all metaphorical thing of like the bridge collapsing, the stability of one's own family or something like that. And I don't know, something like that. Probably some sort of early sort of processing of real world stuff through dream symbols is my guess. But anyways,
They're fascinating. They could be anything.
what's that?
I said dreams are fascinating. They could be anything.
It could be, but generally I think we have kind of a hunch as to like what they're getting at. I think those hunches are pretty like good indicators. So if I go looking through like a dream dictionary of like, this is what a shark means, if it doesn't feel that way to me, I know that that's not what my brain was trying to,
Oh yeah, those are so like bogus, new agey. I mean, it's funny how like you can be. I'm a very like woo woo person. I tell people that I'm like, I'm woo, okay, I'm woo, but also I know bullshit when I see bullshit.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think it's great to be open to a lot of stuff, if not everything, but it's also good to not be naive in certain ways too, and like to see past that. So yeah, I also go very woo. I'm like maybe somewhere there's 50-50 like hard materialist science guy in me. In fact, here's my little homemade radio that I was working on.
I know. I saw that on your story, and I was like, no, I did not know that speakers are nothing but magnets. What?
I know. Neither did I until I finally gave it a try, and it was amazing. The sound was coming from the magnet, like it was emitting the sound waves by pushing the air around by jiggling. It's so cool.
I mean, this is when like the theory and the reality collide and like blow your mind, because it's like we know that everything is just vibrations, but then when you see it and you're like, no, it's literally just the air vibrating. That's wild.
It is. I love that quote. It really inspires me by Tesla, where he says, like, if you want to kind of get to the meaning of the universe, like think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibrations. And it's true. And I mean, musically speaking, pretty, that's kind of on the nose and pretty obvious to see, but like even visual art is like, it's all frequencies of color, you know, which like light and color are just part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is all frequency. So it's just interesting how like every discipline touches that idea, I think, in a pretty deep way, that like it really does come down to vibration frequencies. And yeah, I guess our like, because like color is different wavelengths. Like red is really big wavelengths and violets, you know, very, that's why they say it's like a more enlightened color, like purples and violets, because it's got a higher vibrational frequency to it.
Well, and it's interesting because like that can be a scientific fact simultaneously. Well, a person can also be colorblind, and so they may not be able or capable of personally in seeing and interpreting color in the same way. And I think my partner and I have been talking about this in the last couple days about, I said something about how like my mouth is faster than my brain. And I think that that's really true. A lot of times I don't even know what I think or feel until it comes popping out of my mouth, and then I go, "Oh, yeah, that was accurate." But I think that just personally, I think that like the vibrations of our own consciousness are happening not just inside of our brains, but everywhere in our bodies, including in our eyeballs and how we interpret color. And when you change the vibrational wavelength of your thoughts, then you open yourself to different perceptions altogether. I'm my partner and I both got into Wim Hof breathing and cold exposure in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a lot more dutiful about it than I am. I will say that.
You do
But I
like
love
ice
it.
baths and stuff, or
Yes, yes, we bought a well, we were gifted, I should say, it was a present, but we were gifted a that or 100 pound, or what is it, 100 gallon stock tank that sits in our backyard. And yes, we get in it and take ice baths
holy
and take
crap.
cold showers.
I love, I do actually love like blasting my face with cold water at the end of a shower and like shocking my eyeballs out of my skull and like getting it on my brain and feeling it like kind of seep into your top
It
layer
does.
of your
Well,
brain.
the science behind it's fascinating because at under 60 degrees after 3 minutes, there's a complete thyroid hormonal effect, and your body actually produces 250% more dopamine after you have had that level of cold exposure for that amount of time. And then it changes as you go, and there's, you know, more to it, but like for the fulcrum point of effort to return, it's so powerful. It's like it is, oh, I feel sad, whatever icky feeling, you can literally wash it away. And then you know what, Chuck? That's not gonna fly. Get down. Oh, so naughty. Will you get him out of here, please? I'm sorry. I'm on a podcast.
So actually, to kind of connect both those ideas together, I do want to share a little story about one of my, I guess, like a life-changing day for me, which was like the first and kind of like the main and only best psilocybin trip I ever had. In my young 20s. I guess I'm in my late 20s
I
now.
was gonna say, how old are you? Because to my eyeballs, you look like a tiny baby. You look
I know. I look
like
like a
three having
teenager again
babies
now,
over here.
especially now that I shaved my head. I feel like I shaved a few years off, which is all good. Now that I'm heading towards late 20s, it's like I don't mind sort of coming across younger all of a sudden. I used to really hate having a baby face and stuff, and it really upset me. And I had braces for far too long in high school. So yeah, there was definitely like some insecurity with looking like a little kid. But now I'm okay with it. But in
You and
any
Lucas
case,
look just alike. I mean, it's like little carbon copy. It's the The cutest.
He's got the same kind of furrowed brow, like this sort of like eyebrow stuff. Like he has that same intense stare.
Oh, darling. I love
but
it.
but yeah, as for that little story,
Yeah, please. Sorry.
yeah, I was having a great time, and this was really sort of the like, I guess the like I said, it sort of was the pinnacle, where I had this like ego death moment, really stopped caring about, well, wow, connecting all points here. I stopped caring about what I looked like, was kind of looking in the mirror, and just had this great sense of like relief of like, all that judgment I've been passing on myself and all the judging I've been doing on everyone else and all the judgment that's been coming my way, like all just stopped mattering, just in like a general, like, full scale kind of thing. And I just felt so freed by that. And like, um, I felt that like the real true me was just consciousness underneath all of the physical stuff. And uh, so it was a really special moment. And I felt when I kind of came into contact with the deepest, I guess, like metaphysical version of myself, or root or center, however you want to call it, blue came to my mind, like just a pure sense of blue. And so I always, after that experience, sort of felt like there was this innately blue, like depth to whatever. It wasn't like a sad, depressed blue. It was just like a vibrant blue that sort of went along with this feeling of like, wow, it felt like the form right before my most reduced form of just being a pinpoint of consciousness. Right before that, my identity was blue. So it went from like being me to like slowly shaving all of that away and having nothing, or being blue, and then just like consciousness. But what that connects to is that I took a shower, and in this really blissful state, and I was turning the temperature, and it was becoming different colors. There was like a synesthesia sort of moment where red was um, red was like hot water. It was kind of obvious, but when it got to like lukewarm water, it would sort of pass into that like green yellow zone. And then as it got towards freezing cold water, it would go like blue, lighter blue, until it got white. Like freezing cold water was pure white. It felt like all the like, like pure sunlight like coming onto my brain or something, like feeding all of this color and information and like power. But it was so cool to just like kind of twist through the colors and temperatures simultaneously. And like that became, I think it became something that I do on the following trips, which would, the only other really cool part about that was that like I would imagine different civilizations that would develop around suns with those colors. So like a red sun and a red planet would be like really primitive. And in my mind, it was sort of this theme song playing in the background going, husk, husk, like a big woolly mammoth walking around or something. And so yeah, I would kind of scroll through, and then like the civilization would get more advanced as the sun color got closer to like yellow, like our sun. And then you'd have like humanity, but then as you cranked it beyond that to like the cooler light, like the blue suns or the white suns, then it would be like hyper advanced civilizations. It was almost like, I don't know, sort of the chakra, like ascending, how the chakras kind of align with this, like going from more primitive to more refined in a number of different ways. But it was like that. So
I only just recently learned that chakras extend a lot further than I had previously known. That there are like 4 chakras beyond your crown chakra that they keep extending as like your spinal column would.
that's just over my head.
I was reading about it, and I was like, whoa. Which I sometimes like, I enjoy to play with that perception, like how you can kind of feel things that aren't quite touching you, or know things sometimes you don't quite know, although there are certainly things that you have no idea about. I know
I
I
didn't
just,
actually mean to dismiss that. I was making a pun. It just went unnoticed, saying that
oh,
it's
am I just thick?
over your head.
Oh my God. That was such a good pun too.
That was like, I was taking a bit of a leap of faith there that would get noticed.
Terrible. Oh, terrible, Quinn.
No, it was just a bad joke is all.
No, it was a good joke. That was a great joke.
But I think I've heard about like there are the sevens chakras, but there's like 13 as a different system too. And maybe that's kind of,
I think that might be what I was reading about. Who knows?
but I do love the idea of chakras. And I love how Avatar The Last Airbender talks about it too, if you've ever seen that.
No, I've never seen it.
The
I should say, like, I have
whole
a
show.
limited bandwidth for CGI.
This is not CGI.
No?
It's
Is that animated?
hand-drawn animation, so it's really beautiful.
Oh, okay. Actually, I do know what you're talking about, but no, I've never seen it. I should watch it. I mean, your last movie recommendation was,
This is
I have to say, great.
Oh yeah. Well, I can't wait to talk about that. This is a TV show. It's the one with the kid with the arrow on his head.
Right. And he's like bald and he wears orange.
Oh, if you haven't watched it, like I am so envious of you. Like I know anyone who has watched it would envy you right now. So like you're in for such a treat if you can make it through that. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the first, like the original one is the best. The whole Korra thing is pretty good, and once you're hooked on the first one, you'll kind of inevitably want to check out the other one. But the Avatar: The Last Airbender is just one of those, like, it goes beyond being entertaining. It's really a work of art in its entirety. So it's just, it's beautiful. It's great storytelling, great character development, great art direction, so inventive and
Wrote it down.
It's worth writing down. I'm just excited for you that you get that ahead of you if you've never experienced that show. So that's cool.
I love it.
Especially if you said you grew up with cartoons and stuff.
I love cartoons.
I think this will resonate, but yeah, it's kind of like American anime, but
that's sort of where I'm at in the anime universe. Like I'm like a toe in. I'm obsessed with Studio Ghibli.
yeah,
And like I loved Sailor. I mean, I still love Sailor Moon, but like really had a phase with Sailor Moon. But I never went like full. I like flirted with manga and read some comics, but I was like, it seemed like such a daunting universe. I'm like, you can't go all the way there.
right. It's like
Nerddom.
it seems like for
go all the
every
way.
show, it's like hundreds of episodes, and you have to be like ready to hand over hours and days of your life to make it all the way through. Whether yeah, like my sisters-in-law love anime, but like they're like, yeah, on 500 episode 512 of like One Piece or whatever else, and it's like that's just a commitment I can't personally make. So I think this is concise enough that you'll find it like reasonable to get through.
Well, I like the idea that it already happened a long time ago. I love getting into something that's done and over and has like an end, and you can
Yes.
be like, and that's the end.
It is very much like that, and that's part of why it's so satisfying is like it just resolves, no big cliffhanger, no big we want to squeeze more money out of this kind of sequel thing. Like, yeah, it's so sad when something gets diluted by a sequel in order to make money, you know?
Oh, that's another thing my partner and I have talked about lately, like just Hollywood and like movies. It feels like movies are dead. I mean, Dune was good. I did really like Dune. I'll say that. But that's like the only movie that I've seen in I can't even remember how long.
I can't comment on Dune properly. I went to go see it in theaters. China and I were in our early parent phase, so we literally just reclined in the chairs and fell asleep in the theaters. And I was like getting annoyed at how loud it was. I was like, yeah, I'm trying to sleep here. I think there's like a really nice theater, Evergreen Parkway, which has like these leather like reclining seats that like have a footrest, and like there it feels like a big grandpa chair. And so we bring blankets with us and like get all cozy and but yeah, I think that we just napped through that whole thing. So I've got to see that again. But yeah, you're really making a solid point that I don't know what the last like moving movie I saw was. There is a TV show that I'm watching right now though.
Oh, TV is in its golden age. I think
Yeah,
TV is
that
having
might
the
be
best
true.
time of its life.
That's so true. Yeah, TV shows are like 1 hour movies now, like every episode.
Yep.
And that's like kind of the new standard. But something that have you this is like a really dark show and like it'd be interesting to know if you do entertain dark stuff given how like bright and flamboyant your artwork is. But we've been watching The Boys. I don't know if you've heard of it or seen
Oh,
it, and it's like
I don't do superheroes. I'm very anti
same
superheroes.
same like anti-Marvel kind of
Yeah,
like
I don't like that.
yeah, and the disgusting CGI that's just over
Yeah, and it
the
like makes you feel like you're gonna puke because the
yeah.
camera is like
Everything's like flying in your face all the
yes,
time.
I hate that.
Yeah, I hate it too. This is not that. It has the superhero theme to it, but it's like, oh man, it's just so dark that it like it's one of the few things that like makes me it makes me think about the shadow of humanity and of myself in like a very real way. And but it's basically like the Superman character of it is like a sociopathic murderer. He's like, and it's all run. It's
Yeah.
like this like Disney company basically called Vought, who like owns these 7 superheroes and uses them as like very corporate mascots, you know, and like has their theme parks and whatnot. And so like it kind of shows that whole shady underbelly of the corporate America and like and how they'll just do anything to appease the stats and the masses. So the show, it's like not a superhero show by any standard of like what you might expect. It's very R-rated, very like very dark and gritty and grim, which is typically not my favorite thing. In fact, I usually complain to China that I think everything is too dystopic now, all of the media, that it just depresses me. And so a big part of like the art that I make is I try to make it very sort of like fantastical and whimsical and I don't know, sort of at least have some positive undercurrent to it, whether lyrically or something, because I just do have a pretty big problem with like how we're nonstop, like the options on Netflix or whatever streaming. It's just like every other thing feels like this dystopic prediction about where humanity's heading. And like it feels like when you feed enough of that into the collective psyche and unconscious that we're just gonna bring it into reality and like not even realize that we're doing it, like, you know,
Well,
kind of
it's funny that you say that because I've recently thought about exactly what you're talking about because there's the morbid fascination, the car crash culture of like, oh, how could we end ourselves in so many ways and you can't look away and it's entertainment. And I've wondered if what you're saying is true. Like, are we willing it into fruition? Like what you seek, you will find. Or sometimes I've also wondered if it's part of like the unconscious emotional processing of all the things we know are true, but we can't change. And so it's like we
cathartic.
know what we're doing is heading in this direction and we don't know how to, like, we can't see our way out in some ways. Like I often feel that way, like not that I can't imagine something different, but it's hard to see where the door is at this point. Like what is the thing that would create a tipping point or change what people see as possible? Because yeah, I do think you're right. I think there's definitely like overemphasize morbid fascination with Annihilation, which is an amazing film.
I do like that film a lot, and I really like the ending of it and the like.
Have you read the book?
No.
Oh, the book is also very, very good. It's a good like beach read, page turner that feels just like the movie.
I'm sure.
The end of that movie is like
I love that psychedelic scene with the like liquid or whatever, whatever that thing is, the alien, or I don't know. I need to revisit it. I saw it in theaters when it came out, so like I'm so rusty on it now. I need to absolutely watch it again, but I loved it a lot. And now that kind of annihilation feels a lot more organic in a way, but the kind of annihilation that I feel like we're so like
courting.
It seems like, yeah, it's kind of like self-inflicted, not like this like, oh, alien organisms are gonna infect you and you're gonna become one with them sort of thing. It's more like,
Too late.
yeah, it's more like the doom that we face is like completely our doing, is the general tone of a lot of this media. I feel like is like, oh, we're going to do these CRISPR experiments, and then genetically altered humans will, it's always, of course, every movie and TV show has to have a problem. Otherwise it would be too boring to watch. So exploring these different problems, I don't know. I mean, there's value to it, I'm sure, but also does make you wonder.
Sometimes I think there can be. I don't think there's inherently value to it. A lot of it's just brain candy.
Yeah.
Enforcing old stereotypes, which are what got us here in the first place.
So I do feel like that is when you ask, well, what could change it? I feel like that is that special moment for creators, whether you're an artist or just not just but whether you're an artist or an engineer or something that doesn't exactly fit artists, I think all these different creators, I mean, that's really what I've kind of distilled my like philosophy down to, is like creation, not just in an artistic form, but exploration, going that extra step further to learn more and to be curious, and then to try and create something that helps everybody. I guess that's like my ultimate drive right there. And so when you say like, well, what could change things? That's where I get super inspired and excited, thinking like, what if as an artist, like I could create something that could contribute to this, like maybe not push it all the way, but help to like get that ball rolling a little bit. And that gets me really excited, like knowing that there is that little bit of power that we can exercise. And maybe that idea won't stick. Maybe it won't be as successful as we think, but like, I love coming up against the problem with that like creative excitement. So I do think artists hold the power to change the narrative. And like, I mean, if all that media and the directors and creators has enough power to have us noticing that it seems really kind of dreary and little morose, the outlook on humanity, I feel like if that's noticeable to us now, then just the opposite could be noticeable. But also these things are kind of like, they go in waves. Like culture will be doom and gloom for 10 years, and then maybe it'll sort of negate itself and be all flowers and rainbows, and bad things don't exist anymore. We're tired. Same with like political leaders, even though that's all a sham, but it's like, oh, we want the Democrat who's gonna, support the people, and even though that's, once again, more puppetry and stuff, but and then it's like, but then, for those who are kind of caught up in the whole political rat race, it's like, oh, now we want to do the opposite thing. We want, the likable Southern dude or whatever, the more conservative. Yeah, we want conservative, we want progressive, we want conservative. It's back and forth. It's like culture constantly sort of
Oh my God.
It,
I'm very over culture war at this point in my life. I have to say, like, I have a lot of friends that want to engage in it and they want to like talk about what the Republicans did now. And I just it feels like a lower level of noise than what I want to engage in. I think it's what
yeah,
you're talking about, like artists and your potential. I think that's part of what helped me to embrace the way that my art comes out and looks so funny and makes people laugh. Like it used to break my heart, and I was like, I want to be serious and I want to change things and I want to draw a bowl of fruit that doesn't make people go, oh, you know. But the truth is that I have realized through other life experiences besides art that the ability to disarm someone enough so that they laugh is energetically powerful in and of itself. Like that's already like I think that I've kind of given up on a lot of other things that feel loftier and that have more of like the hubris of youth attached and yet are so much more serious. And I'm just like, my agenda is to make you laugh. I hope that you think that whatever I made is funny because when I'm making something, I know I'm on the right track if I start laughing because I'm just like, this is so stupid. Or it's, there's other things that kind of turn me on creatively. And I'm not maybe in a point where I'm exploring that publicly as much, but like laughter is genuinely like the place where I know I'm on the money. It's like I know that I'm doing something good there. It's
that's
okay to
great.
make people laugh.
When you put that in your bio there, feel free to laugh at my art. And I did want to actually like pick that apart a little bit, but like, um, yeah, you perfectly explained it right there because I was curious what that really meant, like if it was a self-deprecating kind of remark or if it was actually like, I want you to giggle at, I want you to actually laugh, like this is meant to make you laugh. So it sounds like both maybe a little bit of a humbling remark and
Yeah.
also something that you really do have an agenda for is like, I want you to
Yeah. I mean, when I think about like all the things in my life that I've done so far and what thread like ties it together and what like makes me want to get up in the morning and makes me excited, it's the opportunity to connect with someone and to potentially make them laugh. When I was in service, that's what I loved. And like you come in, you had a shitty day at your, office jobby or whatever you do. And I guarantee you by the time you leave in another hour, you're going to feel better. I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to make you happy. And I think that that's the gift that I'm trying to pass on. And I think that it's also okay to do that with my art. And I think that's okay that I have to give myself like I have to remind myself like it's okay to just laugh at this and like think that it's stupid. That's okay. That's good. Somebody else will paint serious bowls of fruit and like wax poetic and maybe open the door to another universe. And maybe my job is just to like make people laugh in the interim so that sometimes their guard goes down for a split second and then their mind opens when they're not paying any attention and the light of any new thought can come in.
Have you ever heard of Chuck Palahniuk?
Yes, yes.
Have you listened to him talk at all ever?
Not so much.
His interviews have been some of the most interesting conversations I've listened to in a long time. And oh yeah, if you're gonna write this right, he's worth listening to. He just really gives me this a rush of creative excitement and inspiration, but in the most like indirect way, just hearing him talk. But you talking about this reminds me of him because he talks about kind of making a fool of himself with one of his stories. It's called Guts. And apparently it's so like humiliating to read. He just thinks that like it's basically like a ritualistic death for him, like a social death, because it's so disgusting and just nobody should ever read this thing in public. And he does. almost as a way to just like strip his sense of trying to look good anymore, helps bring him to like zero. And also, so many people come forth with their most horrific, darkest stories that they've never told anybody. And some of them might be more intense than the one that he told. And it's a fictional story, the one that he tells live. But I was just very moved and inspired by that when he was sort of saying that like he'll make himself the biggest idiot so that like other people, it opens the door for other people to like allow themselves to come forth with some of their own humanity. And he just really puts a lot of emphasis on how beautiful some of the like things that we think are not beautiful, basically. And it was the exact same thing where somebody had written something that they meant to be so serious, because he's a writer. He wrote Fight Club among some other stuff. And it made people laugh, and they were so offended and appalled by it. They're like, they were so hurt by that. But then they learned to reframe their perspective, and suddenly like they felt a great sense of fulfillment and power being able to create writing that makes people laugh. So I just thought that was so cool. And like I think, yeah, we all get so caught up in our own pride and ego that it's hard to like accept that something we take totally serious might be the biggest joke in the world to someone else, but that's not a bad thing at all. That's like
Yeah.
still a great gift to them. And that's I think that's what we do as like true artists. Or I don't want to say true artists like there's an untrue artist, but I think an artist, a big part of being an artist is giving gifts to the world. That's most of what the art is, or they're just gifts in one form or another, whether it's this is for 500 people and it's kind of generalized for everybody, or this was just for this one person. But I write a lot of my music personally to like specific one person. And sometimes I'll let them know that this song was written for you, and sometimes I won't. But I'm not necessarily trying to give the gift of laughter, although I do make really goofy music that like is so stupid that like I'm laughing the whole way through, and it's so just nourishing to my soul and cracks me up. And I show that sometimes. I've been thinking about trolling everyone and saying, oh, next album's gonna drop, and then I put all my shitty songs out as like a goof. They're like horrendously intentionally bad songs that I just like get all my goofy character voices out and all that stuff. So
Okay, you be careful what you wish for there, because okay, so my partner is also a musician. And you know, I don't want to tell all his tea on a podcast, but he's done some things like that, and it's like he always laments that his catchiest stuff is never serious. He's like, all the catchy stuff, you know, just wait, you dump all your brain garbage out there and you'll fucking get famous for it, so just be careful.
I'm scared. Yeah, I'm so scared it'll be like I'm stuck performing this stuff for the next like 30 years. It was all a joke.
The universe has the most ironic, twisted sense of humor. I mean, that's something I'm very sure of. So, but I mean, how great would that be? That'd be great. It'd be great.
I don't know if that would be a paradox that would delight me, or if it would just be like a deep contradiction that would like irritate me, or you know, like that ironic nature that you're talking about. But I do think that like that is a side of me that I'm kind of like hiding from the world, because you know we all want to look good in one way or another. And so yeah, I don't know if that perfectly connects to everything you were saying there, but that was kind of the thought that spawned from that idea that you were saying, that like, you know, you got to be okay with the fact that your art has this effect on people that like maybe you weren't fully intending, maybe now you are. But yeah, it sounds like you create it with an intention to give it as a gift, like you were saying, like as a gift of laughter or just joy in some form.
And I think also for myself, like I'm learning to, like, I can't pretend like all my creative battles have been fought, because there's definitely a lot that I still am mega struggling with in creative sustainability practice. But it's like I've learned how to kind of give things away to others, and I'm trying to learn how to keep things for myself. um, I think that I'm figuring that balance out so that I can sustain the practice of creating, period.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, I think if I don't keep some for me, then it might grow bitter. It might change. I mean, who knows? Who knows what will happen in general? But yeah, I am trying to be better about that. I am trying to do more.
Keep some, what do you mean by that? Like physically keep pieces of art around?
I'm more like not share. Like
Oh,
make things that I am just enjoying making, and draw things that I enjoy to draw or sketch, and not worry about it fitting into the brand that I present to the rest of the world.
yep. I hear that totally. Um, and I think that it was sort of the thought behind when I said like the thought flashes across my mind of like, okay, was Dreamshark just a 3-year project and now I want to start with a fresh slate again? Because now I'm sort of stuck trying to fit everything into that aesthetic. And but the beautiful thing that I'm trying to carve out for myself that is, I think, going to be the most freeing thing of all is just that, like, I don't have to pick a path. As long as I'm doing Dreamshark, kind of my rule is that like I can create any way I want to. And
Of course.
I don't have to be a musician through and through. I don't have to be a painter through and through. I don't have to be a sculptor. I don't have to make only video games. You know, I don't have to just make t-shirts and sweatshirts or whatever. It's like I could do them all at once or I could stop doing some. But the point is that it's just supposed to be a vehicle to be able to create in any way that I want. And on that note, you were saying that you feel like not all your creative battles are fought. Is there a mode of creation that you're sort of tempted to get into that you're like just kind of flirting with, but not really going public yet with it, or you want to, or it's been a long time kind of stewing in the back of your mind?
I mean, for me, I think that the thing that like I don't share as much are more like sketches and pinup stuff that's not necessarily what I would call like family friendly, NSFW kind of stuff,
Okay.
where I enjoy it and I make it for me. And I think that it is an important part of my creative process, but I don't know necessarily where that integrates into what I'm trying to do publicly, financially. And I'm kind of giving myself more permission to be like, that's fine. You can, I like, for example, at the markets, more of what more of what I've sold is like jewelry. And so that's more 3D practical stuff. But I'm also trying to kind of wholesale, and that's cards and paper products and stickers. And I think, like you're saying, like I can't, it's more fulfilling not to just be one thing and not to just do one thing. It's not easy figuring out how to spin a lot of plates and not have them all fall down and break, or just be like, I have sticks, that's harder. But I do think that the more that I work at it and practice and figure out a way to like do this one, okay, now I'm doing this one, it's I see the possibilities. And yeah, I hope that I can continue to make time for all of that stuff and enjoy creating for the sake of creating, and not worry about if it's gonna sell, and also maybe hopefully make some things that will pay rent and put, the clothing on my back that I must have as a human.
With that being said, I don't really know exactly how it is you sustain with your work, as in, I don't know what markets you do, because I saw you at the night market. I do the Portland Saturday market. Obviously, you don't set up there, but is there another one that you're doing regularly?
The night market has been my most fun main market. I've tried a couple of others. Um, it is that I did first market at the end of 2019, and then 2020 happened, so there's this like big pause, and then they came back last year. So I feel like I've kind of seen the abilities and also the limitations with markets. They are such hard work, and I think that so much of what I do, though it might delight people, it's not necessarily for everyone, to the point where they're like, oh, I got to get my wallet out as fast as possible. Like, I feel like I don't think I would try Saturday market, because I think I'd get a lot of looky-loos and not a lot of business. And also I worry about the impact on the product. I'm trying to kind of like
Impact on the product.
strategy
So,
there.
oh, what do you mean by impact on the product?
Oh, just because polymer is plastic. So the plastic gets dirty really, really easily. And
Mm.
that's kind of what I deal with, is like trying to balance the the price point with the material and keep it looking expensive and good and like something that people want. Like, I wouldn't want to buy stuff that's dirty. I wouldn't want to buy cards that have dirt and dust on them. So
Yeah.
that's just like it's one of those things that I think about. Although I am gonna do last Thursday, which is outside. So
On Alberta?
mhm.
I've done
I
that.
live really close and it's free.
Oh yeah. I did that one a couple times. It's been sort of hit or miss for me. Never a really big hit, but like you said, it's free. But
Is the Saturday, how much does Saturday market cost? I don't even know.
I would call it like $100 for the weekend, pretty much. I think you would actually do really well there, and if it's not too out of line to say, I do really well there, and other people do too, and people with better setups than me, and people with worse setups or like more simple setups or whatever. But like, um,
That's part of my problem too, is that I don't have a simple setup and I don't really know how to be simple. I'm sort of extra and fluffy and fancy, and I need everything to be like, and
mine
it's
pretty.
a big pain in the butt.
Mine takes an hour to set up, and sometimes a little longer.
That is efficient. That is very efficient. When I did the night market, it's like an hour to 2 hours over the course of 2 to 3 days. I'm such a Nancy. Like, that's part of why I don't do markets, is because I'm just too fussy and Nancy and particular.
Well, you can also, I mean, little cost a little more, but there are people who will like set up the bulk of it for you if you pay them like $20 for the weekend, basically. Like, there's a lot of um, workers who are like set up and break down multiple vendor stuff, and then they take it into storage. And I have storage down there that I just put my stuff in a cart that they provide.
I wondered about that because you have a lot of big items.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw a wrench in our conversation, but
yeah.
I need to use the restroom.
Oh, go for it. In the next 20 minutes or so, but I wanted to definitely discuss that documentary. That
Oh my
is,
God.
I haven't really gotten to discuss it in depth with many people at all. I forced my brother to watch it, and he just dragged his heels so hard because he's
Really?
a pilot. He's a pilot, and he's just like was adamant that like there is no interesting nature to UFOs. Like, he hadn't seen them, so he's kind of like, well, I'm not convinced basically. And like he
What type
thought,
of pilot?
what?
What type of a pilot? Is he like a commercial pilot
He
or
flies
Air Force?
mostly cargo.
Mm.
So like giant planes filled with like could be weapons, it could be Taylor Swift's gear. Like he's flown both things. He's flown weapons over to Ukraine. He's flown Taylor Swift's tour
Oh
stuff.
my
So
God.
I guess it's just any kind of cargo. But
Okay.
in any case, yeah, he was not like having it. And then by the end of it, after he saw the final scene of it, the Rua Zimbabwe kids at the REL school, then he was like, all right, that was kind of interesting. So after that, he kind of opened up a little bit more to the idea, I think. But I want to hear your thoughts, so I won't do much more talking there. What did you think of it, all in all?
Well, all in all, it was like a lot of things where suddenly like stuff made more sense. You know, there were things that they talked about in that documentary where I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks historically. You know, first of all, that school thing, that was very compelling. I found those kids, not only was the like amorality of filming them immediately after it happened, did that track 100%. Like, of course they put a film crew in there. They're like, what happened? But then after the fact and what they said about, you know, these like ideas being transmitted to them, I've actually thought about that a lot, about the idea of like technology is bad. You know, we don't, you know, I mean, it's very strange, right? Because so much of what we do, even what we're doing right now, is facilitated in our day-to-day lives by technology. But like we were talking about earlier, I think to like foster an environment for creativity, oftentimes it's like you need to not focus on your exterior senses and the stimulation like technology provides all the time, but you need to like shutter it down, and then you're able to kind of tap into these other more true and powerful things in some ways.
Yeah, clarity and focus and presence.
Yes. And then also inspiration, because, you know, the truth about creativity and things that you make is like, and kids are the same way. Like it comes through you, but it's not of you. Like you're just how it happened to come about. You didn't make it, not in any real way. Like you don't have a, you don't have any kind of ownership over the impetus of it.
So
So I
yeah,
don't know.
so we're vessels for these ideas, basically.
Yes, I think so.
But
Or
um,
vessels for energy channels, maybe.
but then how do you reconcile this? I mean, if we're gonna, for those listening, just kind of a brief overview would be that like in 1994 or six, one of those years, in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, at the REL schoolhouse, there was a couple of teachers indoors, and the kids were out at recess, and reportedly by the kids, a shiny disc flew overhead and landed near logs that had been cut down that sort of marked the edge of their recess field. And over by the logs, little beings, according to the children, were sending telepathic messages about our relationship with technology and how it's destroying the planet, and how we're all going to not be able to breathe because we're destroying the trees and the lungs of the planet basically and stuff, which was actually kind of interesting given that COVID is a respiratory disease and all the wildfires that we're experiencing, you know, year after year. It really is like the lungs of the planet. It falls in line with, now this was 1990 something, so almost 30 years ago. It seems almost prophetic in a way. That's kind of the abridged version there. But anyways, yeah, it's
Well, the
the
breath thing
question.
is interesting because the when my partner and I started practicing Wim Hof and started to learn about Wim Hof, and when I started to like physically do breathing protocols and experience all the different like consciousness and brainwave frequencies of the breathing and everything, that's when I got this idea like, oh, I am breath, like consciousness is breath. It's like we are breath. I think, and to get real woo, but like that's what we came here today to do, let's be honest. Like I at this point I'm fairly well convinced that like the essence of consciousness exists in the mechanism of breath and oxygen for humans, at least. Like that's how it's like working somehow, because I think that we have all this consciousness in these other parts of our bodies, like my mouth being faster than my brain. That's, I think, really genuinely because I have a consciousness somewhere in here that makes me loquacious and verbal, and it gives me a knack for languages. Or like my hands, like they have this consciousness that I don't really take credit for. They make things and do things that I don't really know how they do sometimes. I'm like, I don't know why I do that. I just do. It's a consciousness that is bigger and greater than the ego consciousness of day to day living. And I think also part of it is like how well, I don't want to say programmed, but you know, we're taught, we're indoctrinated with a certain type of view of how the world is. And like you're talking about your brother, he's a pilot. He's like, well, I don't know, I've never seen that or whatever. It's like that's like saying, you know, there's that, I think it's maybe even a saying or a quote, like saying that there's no extraterrestrial life or anything outside of what we know is like taking a spoonful of water from the ocean and saying there are no sharks and no whales because there's none in the spoon.
Mhm.
You know, it's just we are very small in our experiences, and as it should be, you know, we're constantly blocking out all this stimulation just so that we can have this like precious and crazy experience. But yeah, I'm pretty well convinced that consciousness is breath at this point.
All right. So how does this help you to make sense of it all though when these children say that like little beings came out of a craft? Are they consciousness breath equal to ours? Are they a different thing, or is this consciousness breath kind of the source energy that you're talking about that we're all a part of? Like, where do they fit into it, and how do you make sense of that whole story? Like,
Well, I think, I mean, like
are they
I'm a
interdimensional? Are they extraterrestrial? Time traveling?
I
What
think
do
there's a
they
lot of it involved. I think time travel, I wonder if that's not a part of it. I mean, obviously, I'm no one. I'm just a yahoo with ideas. But when I watched the Bob Lazar documentary where he talks about the like them trying to understand the physics of propulsion in the discs that we know about, and how it was like the discs weren't moving, the world, like the universe is moving around the discs. I feel like it makes sense to me. I don't, because I see consciousness as like this giant unifying thing, like you were talking about on psilocybin trips where you experience that.
Mhm.
It's like my consciousness in this spaceship flesh iteration um, is the same consciousness as whatever's happening when a bee who has infrared vision is experiencing flowers on another level and seeing like landing strips that I don't see. And I feel like that must be true.
Can I say something about that real quick?
Sure,
I
yeah.
just recently had the realization because I was watching a lot of videos about light and color and electromagnetism, and like it finally just last week, that specific thing, it dawned on me that every picture we've been shown of like, and this is what it looks like for infrared or ultraviolet light, it's like, no, that's not what it looks like, because we literally we can't see those frequencies. So like it's always just an artistic like representation of what it might be, or maybe they like have certain areas where they can predict it. But it just occurred to me last week that like when we see like night vision, for example, we're like, oh, that's what infrared looks like. Infrared red is below red, but it's invisible to our eyes. So it's not actually what infrared looks like. You're just
Right.
seeing orange, red, and yellow and blue and so forth. So that just made me crack up the other week. That I was like, oh, all that crap about like this is how beautiful it looks to bees and stuff. It's like we're just once again using colors that we can see to depict something that we can't see. But sorry to interrupt.
No, that's I think that that's I feel that way about my dog all the time. Like when we're out walking and I'm like, "Okay, can we walk?" And he's like, "No, the many smells in this bush are." I always like joke that he's like, "Lady, you have no idea what you're missing. The gossip, the tales of intrigue." Like because dogs experience the world nose first and they're getting so much information that we are just not getting.
Yeah.
And who knows what that's like? It seems highly stimulating if Chuck's anything to go by.
Yeah, constantly reading a different language. Like, I mean, like plants give off pheromones and like are interacting with each other that way. Like, who knows if a dog is picking up on plant conversations in a sense, you know, plant communication and all that
I
stuff.
figure it's all just dog pee gossip mostly, but yeah.
Oh, they were there? Oh, they were
Oh,
here?
oh no, she didn't
All
know.
up in my turf? But I mean, all right. So with all this, you seem pretty chill on the idea. Like it seems like you're like, wow, that's interesting, but like, not gonna like it's not enough to like send me into a like a paralyzed, debilitated state. You don't seem like this is a frightening concept to you. That maybe there's visitation by other conscious beings, and you don't think that there's any nefarious agenda that could be
No way. Everything that I've seen indicates the exact opposite. It seems like a highly evolved I mean, I'm not saying, oh, they're perfect or whatever. I feel like they probably envy the lush, visceral, messy nature of this reality that we enjoy. Like, as we talked about, like, finding that, if you really want to get into creativity, you got to kind of pare things down. I feel like the planet Earth is living in a perpetual state of being like, a hot 18-year-old. Like you're just so stupid and everything is so experiential, there's flavors and colors. There's this comedian on Netflix that I watched recently and she talked about how she's like, I hate sci-fi. Like I don't like sci-fi. There's enough stuff here. I think that that's kind of true. It's like we have every possible input stimulation here, kind of, where I think maybe these evolved beings, it's probably like when you get older and you're like, no, I don't want to take that many drugs anymore. It's actually better to take less drugs.
yeah.
But that seems boring to a 21-year-old or to an 18-year-old hot girl. It's like that's not fun. Staying home and drinking tea and getting good sleep is not fun. And they're like, no, actually having no flavors and all being very small and having no sex is great. And we're like, that seems dull. I think that they're maybe on a timeline or an iteration of consciousness where they are aware of us and they feel maybe like, oh God, let's hope they don't like shit the bed with this gift they've been given. Like maybe they'll reach the tipping point where they level up the ability of consciousness to comprehend things. Maybe we won't. I don't
Now,
know.
do you take it as like do you take it as a fact, or are you still kind of mulling over it like maybe these kids, not like it's trickery or lies, but like maybe there's another mechanism at work here? Like, did they see real beings or were they just projections of the mind? or were, like, did they collectively project, and you know how there were slight discrepancies between their stories, like some of the beings had like black long hair, other ones didn't. There was even a little bit of an extended thing where the director of that film talked about how apparently the aliens or beings or whatever were like playing around on the logs, according to some of the kids, which is just very odd sounding that they would skip around and play like games with them on the logs. Honestly, like that's I think one of the most strangest stories, especially given the amount of children that sort of describe what they witnessed. But for you, do you just sort of take it as like, yeah, those were beings that definitely were there and visited from another planet, or is it still kind of up in the air for you where you're thinking like could be 15 different explanations for to account for why that happened? Um, yeah. Do you lean more towards like feeling solid on it or kind of leaving an open mind on it?
My instincts are that kids don't lie. That's the truth that I know from being around kids and taking care of kids. I think that it's adults that do a good job of telling ourselves what we're supposed to see and what we're supposed to think, and what you're talking about, like kind of like rationalizing and explaining things so that you have a way to make sure that other people still find you credible and believable. But children don't have those structures, which is why they just say things. And I think that oftentimes things that kids, they, again, it's like not having the vocabulary. It's like children can say something that's 100% true and just lack the vocabulary to communicate it in a way that the listener then interprets correctly. So I think that the fallibility is probably more in the communication and less likely to be in the incident itself,
So
just based on what I know about kids.
and I would agree with you there that I do believe that they're telling the truth. But I guess the last question in my mind before fully accepting what they say as the truth is there any other mechanism at work? Is this maybe happening in a way that's different from my like assumption or expectation of this, because basically the way it sounds is aliens in a saucer came from outer space and landed and like presented themselves and telepathically communicated. That's what it sounds like on the surface. um but then like I have this, I don't know, feeling of like, well, what if it's not how it seems, what if it's I mean, you could go down a lot of rabbit holes. You could say like, oh, that was the US government with like, you know advanced technology
There's Jeffrey Epstein.
drugging a bunch of children, wearing alien costumes, traumatizing them. And you could spin it a number of different ways. Or you could say maybe like with enough collective conscious power, you can all kind of manifest something into reality. Maybe 100 school kids for some
100%.
reason were able to tune into a frequency, so to speak, and maybe reveal something that was already there. I don't know. But I guess the last question for you on the subject is, do you think that all these different UFO sightings, because it covered quite a few different ones. There's the one in Socorro, New Mexico with Lonnie Zamora, the cop who saw the egg-shaped one. And there's the Tic Tac, of course, which was more recent in 2004. That's the one with the kind of famous Navy video to go with it. Do you think that it's all the same, or do you think that these are totally different phenomenon that are being observed and all just kind of getting lumped into the UFO category? Yeah, is there a chance that you think that there's a variety of different things happening?
That's a good question. It hadn't even occurred to me that it might be different things. Like, when I've watched some of these documentaries and like listen to podcasts and stuff, it always struck me as different people describing the same thing. Because, okay, so like I used to work in service, and people don't know how to order what they want, especially when it comes to alcohol, wine specifically. They do not have words that are uniform across the board to tell me the thing that they want. And so it's sort of your job is to like understand how this interpretation, like what this person probably means. And 9.9999 times out of 10, you can figure it out. And it's not that there are 57 different kinds of wine on the menu. It's like there's really three. So it's like, do you like this one, or this one? And probably you like them all because you're a booze hound. But yeah, I think that my impression when I saw that stuff was like it's different people describing the same thing, and probably the same thing that is somewhere beyond our current vocabulary and comprehension levels. Because I think, like I was going to ask you, do you speak any other languages?
Not proficiently. I took some Spanish. That's really it. And I know, yeah.
Yeah, so like I've thought about this in terms of languages. I speak fluent German from the time that I lived in Germany, and I also speak fluent Spanish. And there are so many words that you find in a new language that you're like, oh, we never had a word for that. That word is so good. Like it encompasses the meaning so perfectly, you know? One of my favorite is there's a German phrase for teenagers that's called Teenie-Fotze, and it's like, your brain is full of teenage farts. It basically just means like you have teenage brain. And I love that. And there's a lot of other examples, but I think that oftentimes that the plasticity of our consciousness and our ego consciousness particularly, it is made like lubricated and receptive when an idea has been primed to it or introduced. Like I don't speak Hindi, but someone I know who speaks Hindi told me that Hindi is not based on like noun, adjective, sentences the way that we build things in Western language so often, but is more based on relationships. So like all the words are relational to the other words, because the principle of the language is not I. The principle of the language is the web of humanity. Like the web of humanity is the underpinning of the concept of the language. So that gives you a completely different concept of how you are capable of viewing things. And I think that when I see this, like the phenomenon, that's what it strikes me as, is like something that our brains don't have the vocabulary, the conceptual vocabulary for yet.
Yeah, it seems to be a pattern that we haven't yet detected. We can zoom out to see the pattern.
Chuck?
In this way, I almost feel like there is no pattern to it. I mean, there is. I hear what you're saying of like it's like a you have to read between the lines with all these people's accounts and start to piece together some generalities yourself to understand a pattern. And there is one, and it's generally like smooth, metallic craft flying unusually fast with no wings and no signs of propulsion, and exceeding whatever g-force that would probably crush a human being. So there's like signature things that a lot of these things have in common, but like in general, sort of like kind of paranormal phenomenon or phenomena. The woo-woo side of me kind of believes that it's like the universe steering us or interfacing with us or engaging with us, and maybe shape shifting to what we need to see. This is totally, this is now diving off the deep end into like my, just theoretical bullshit. But yeah, it makes me wonder if like, back in the day, people saw flying saucers all the time because of the threat of war and the technological, like the fear of a technology that could, wipe us out. And now it's like a lot of people might see like glowing orbs of light and things like that. And I'm wondering if it's changing because we're changing as a culture, as people. I mean, human knowledge every single day is expanding in like a very fast, rapid way. Just the fact that I was able to share that video with you, the document, or just tell you about it, and then you were able to digest it and get that information. You'll never see that on playing on TV, or you won't hear about it on a news channel. But the fact that we can all be interconnected with other means like social media and texting and stuff. And so information is spreading so fast. So we're changing really fast as humans. And I guess my woo-woo thought is just that, like, I wonder if we're being served up exactly what we need. This makes it sound like there's a God, or that it's a higher intelligence manipulating what we experience. But I wonder if it's really, it brings me to a thought of like, I much rather believe in like a connected organic universe. But if we are all living inside of a computer, or this is simulated or something, it makes you wonder if like maybe there are no extraterrestrials or aliens. It's just the illusion of them to help us like consciously evolve or whatever. Like maybe in this game of life or this simulation of life, there's some nerd sitting at his desk watching us like it's a game of Sims. And he's like, all right, I'll send the flying saucers in. We'll see how they react to that. And we'll like make sure it kind of matches their expectation of like what future tech should look like. And we'll see how they kind of like, we'll see what direction that nudges them in, or like, maybe it's just all one big experiment, and like all the different things that we're experiencing and witnessing, it's all just, somebody else's game. Or I don't know if that's a scary thought or an unfortunate one, but it's just one that pops into my mind as an explanation for like why some people get abducted by aliens and are tortured, and others go on a ride through the galaxy, and others still, just see a flash of something. And in a way, it kind of feels to me like maybe not, the word God is so charged, but so we'll just call it an intelligence in the universe. It feels almost like it's nudging us in directions for growth. And so it makes me wonder if like maybe there really aren't other humanoid beings from other planets. Maybe it's just somehow, I don't know, it comes back to that idea of projecting or something, like that we can all maybe consciously redirect physical reality and project something momentarily, maybe. I don't know. Very, very deep end woo woo thoughts, but I don't know
No,
what to
I'm
make of
I'm
that.
right there with you, and I think it's interesting to talk about like, oh, the idea of what someone thinks is future tech. I think it's been interesting for me to like, I would have said a handful of years ago that I was not necessarily particularly interested in the UFO phenomenon. Like I'm like nerd shit. I don't care what. But I I have since like I think learning more, watching more stuff, being like, damn, that's interesting. That makes sense. Okay, I see you. Now I see that more in line with a lot of like patriarchal narratives in general, where once you like taint something and call it crazy, then it doesn't matter because everything that came from the crazy tree is crazy. So it's like,
Mm,
oh, well, a disc, flying discs, crazy. Tiny little people, crazy. Like, my husband raped me. Oh, you're crazy.
yeah.
It's the
It,
same kind of idea.
there was an intentional stigmatization of it, definitely deliberate,
Absolutely.
like 100%. It was written in like an official memo that like all talk of this stuff should be stigmatized and ridiculed and made to, you know, discredit people and stuff. But yeah, you're right. It's like another form of kind of gaslighting and or you know or just stigmatizing it to the point where everything connected to it gets laughed at too. And so, but it's really cool that there's a sea change going on and people are kind of cracking that book back open, so to speak, or starting to investigate now that seems picked up by, I don't know. I don't know if it's like the just the general people, the culture of the people that's kind of pushed it along, or if it's I don't know, or if it's actually like a planned leak through the government. Like it's hard to know because it does seem like it's on this steady, slow drip kind of over the last couple of years of like uh kind of feeding us like a little morsel at a time. It's kind of
I
warming
wonder
people
if
up
it's
to the
not
idea.
in conjunction with the amount of technology and information we have, just like how, you know, once upon a time there might only be one or two pictures left of you as a baby, and now it's like there's a picture of you every day since you were born.
Yeah.
I think that I feel like for me has fed into like I mean I wouldn't even say change of heart. I just think I never thought much about it until it seemed like, oh, there's too much information about this and evidence of it for it to be something that is no longer a factor in how I could possibly like look at everything. And yeah, I mean, there's cameras everywhere. That's
I
just the truth.
I took a video of one.
Really?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me. Where were you?
In Oregon.
They love Oregon.
I guess I do know that there is like a lot of activity around here in Washington, according to like a map that I looked at. But yeah, I was driving back from Medford because we had just played a show down there, and it was like midday noon, and I thought I saw like the street lamp because they were really bright white. And like at first I thought that's what I saw. And then I kind of like focused my eyes and what I thought was on the right side of my vision, then there was something suddenly on the like kind of top left side of my vision. And it's what I would describe as like a white tube statically fixed in the sky for a good amount of time. I filmed it for 3 minutes while driving. I was in the fast lane going like 70 or 80 or whatever. So it's kind of hard to film. But so the footage itself isn't great, but it does distinctly show a white bar that's sitting still up like 30, 40,000 feet. And I took two other videos in that same area of planes passing by, which had a completely different look to them. So it was pretty perplexing. Now, I'm not calling that aliens or spaceships or anything, but what was really weird about it um, was just that it wasn't moving. It had no wings or anything. The thing had to have been gigantic given how high up it was. It was at like airliner level, you know, like commercial flight level, but just so big. The thing looked like it would have been like a mile long for how high up it was. So its size was unusually gigantic. It kind of looked like it was just like slowly rotating on a diagonal, but then also just sitting still. It looked really reflective. There almost looked like there was like a darker shadow underneath it, and its edges were like growing and shrinking in a kind of unusual sort of like transparent way. But the thing wasn't a cloud. It like obviously wasn't. I rolled down my window and kind of like opened my eyes just to like really look at this thing hard, and it was clearly an object. And then I'm filming it for like 3 minutes, and you can kind of see as I'm only going straight forward, so there's no optical illusion taking place where maybe if you ride alongside a plane or something, you can make it look like it's standing still just due to the optics. But I'm going straight, and this thing's like perpendicular to me. So it would eventually have to kind of make its way across the sky, but it didn't. It just kind of sat up here, and then I'm filming it, and I'm kind of like, I lost it. I don't know where it went. It never traveled away or anything. It just kind of disappeared out of my like camera's view. But I'll send you the video and you can check it out yourself. What really made it compelling for me though is when I Googled or I YouTubed cigar UFO, and like dozens upon dozens of videos with all the same weird little nuances to it, the fading edges, the reflective quality, sitting in the air, being a bright white bar, all the weird little aspects that told me like that was not a plane or a blimp or a cloud. Like at this point, I look every single day up to the sky and every single night pretty much. And like at this point, I don't have a lot of interesting things to report on, but I'm pretty decent at identifying what's what from just looking. And that's really that's the only interesting thing I've seen in those couple of years of looking every day. But like I know what a plane looks like at this point and stuff. And like they have a contrail behind them typically at that height, usually just because of the difference in temperature. But yeah, it leaves a trail behind it. So like there's just so many things that were ruled out. A drone, I don't know how a drone could be either that huge or that high up. There's just not a lot of great explanations for it. So not calling it a spaceship or anything yet, but like the fact that it matched with so many other people's cigar shaped thing, super interesting to me. So that's my personal thing there.
I did remember that I had one story that I wanted to tell you.
Oh yeah.
Get off this call. I have to write that down real quick. Cigar shaped. Oh, okay. Okay, so this was a story I thought about when you initially asked about doing the podcast and talking about the phenomenon. And I was thinking back about like my life and my own personal experiences. And so I've never seen, I mean, I've seen a lot of weird stuff in the sky. I lived at the Grand Canyon for 2 years, which if you're ever looking for a place to look at the sky, I can highly recommend the North Rim of the Grand Canyon because it has the lowest light pollution of anywhere in the continental US. So it is very dark there.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And I saw a lot of stuff there, but the story, I never thought about it. I think about that now of like a lot of stuff that I saw and it just wasn't in my mind to pay attention to it. Like I was like, oh, I don't know what that was. That was weird. Okay, bye. I have to go make out with someone now. Because I'm a selfish flesh bag. No, okay. So once when I was in my 20s, I was back in Iowa in the summertime and I was playing frisbee in like a cornfield in the middle of nowhere with a friend of mine, and it was at night where we had this light up frisbee, and we're just like playing light up frisbee catch in this cornfield, and we had driven in on like an access road, and kind of close by there was like a cell tower or something that had an access parking lot, which was completely lit up with floodlights in this dark area. And I think that must be like, we drove in kind of close, but we didn't want to park there or whatever. We're in the field playing catch frisbee. And then eventually my friend threw the frisbee and it ends up in this parking lot. And I go from being in the darkness, and I hadn't gotten close to the parking lot before, but I go and I'm like approaching this bright light of this like illuminated square of what I assume is just empty cement in the middle of nowhere. And as I get closer, I realize that the parking lot is not empty. It is covered in praying mantises, like 1,000 praying mantises. And I mean, I've seen some praying mantises in my life. Like once when I was biking, one landed on me and it was the best day. but they're not something that you see a lot of out and about in the world. And this parking lot was full of them. And they looked like they were lined up like the military in rows, evenly spaced. And they were all like, I went to go get the Frisbee and then I just stopped. And my friend's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, come here. And then we stood outside the light and we watched while they all moved in unison. And they like turned really slowly all in one direction. And then they do it and then they turn like real slow in another direction. And I mean, we probably stood there for a half hour watching this. It was so bizarre. And then finally we went and got the Frisbee and left. And I never knew, and I've never known what that was. Like, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a botanist.
You didn't look into it at all to find out if that's typical praying mantis behavior, if they congregate like in
Well,
that way?
thinking about it now, like at the time, it was quite a few years ago. It was like sort of pre-smartphone times. It was in a time where like if you wanted to look something up, you would do it later.
Right.
And now, like telling the story, I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should look into that and find out if that's like a thing or not. But at the time, that was to me like I had this like lightning bolt kind of thought where I was like, they're all aliens and they're all fucking receiving messages. Okay.
There is this idea that there are like mantis shaped beings. I don't know if you've heard that before, but like
No. I only know about the
you
lizard people.
yeah, you'd probably love to learn about the collection of like different shapes and sizes that these extraterrestrials supposedly come in. I don't know how if I buy all of them, but like there's some really interesting like descriptions of them, and one of them is the mantis like race that people report these like kind of mantis beings like existing. So who knows, maybe you saw the little minions of like a far out race, or maybe they just do that. I don't know.
Maybe they just do that when there's a parking lot.
I'm super interested now though, like definitely one way or another I'm going to find out like if that's normal or not, because I'm so interested if they actually, because if they don't do that, then you really did witness something super weird. But if they do that, that's still pretty cool and interesting, and I didn't know that. So
It was weird one way or the other. Like it was weird enough to be like, stop what you're doing, watch these bugs for 30 minutes.
that's the whole like semi-spiritual side of me, or that kind of the other half of me that, you know, like I said, God is such a charged word, but that intelligence of the universe, that moment for you, the way you describe it, instantly creates this feeling for me of like, that must have just been like the universe, like very directly giving you that experience. And it's like that idea of like you were given that experience to push you in a direction or something. That's sort of the underlying hunch that I kind of keep coming back to about what the whole UAP, the phenomenon is like, I don't know, something to help us.
What does UAP stand for? I keep always forgetting that abbreviation.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Yeah. The only other one of those that I can say is that when me and my middle school buddy were, well, he's still my good buddy, but when we were in middle school, we saw a basketball sized orb of light kind of hover over our heads in near a cranberry bog in my neighborhood. And but that was such an old memory that I began to kind of like question it and lose it over time. But what makes it still kind of valid in a way to me is that I checked in with that buddy and said, hey, before I tell you any details, remember something significant happened at the cranberry bogs when we were younger? Could you send me a paragraph just describing it so we could double check and see, like, I'll write up a paragraph too, and we'll compare them and see if we're talking about the same story, you know? And he wrote up you know, the details were ever so slightly different. I think he said he thought the orb was like whitish yellow or orangey yellow. There was some discrepancy in the color that we were talking about. I might have said white and he said yellow, or I might have said orangey white and but it was so close. And yeah, we looked at the thing like slowly bobbing overhead and like kind of gently, quiet, you know, like silently. And this is in 2008 or something. So it's like before drones were really like being flown around. And it's just like an orb, like a sphere of light. And we didn't feel like it was a helicopter. And it was really low, like treetop level. So we could kind of get a good look at it. And then it just kind of like floated off, went overhead, floated off in the direction, and then like out and up into the clouds. And so, um, yeah, that was the only other weird kind of. So that fits the whole UAP thing better than UFO, because UFO insinuates that there's an object, but like this thing looked like just light. And so I think UAP fits that thing a lot better. It was just aerial phenomena. It wasn't really an object of any sort. There didn't look like there was any propellers or a craft or anything, and it was small. Still just so weird to this day. I have no explanation for it. So,
Whoa.
but other people post videos like that all the time, like on Reddit, UFOs or YouTube or whatever. And the thing about those cigar shaped videos, or the cigar craft ones that I looked up, they have like 50 views on them. They're not making like a living out of posting hoaxes.
No.
And I'll go to the rest of their channel and it's like their regular life, you know? And then like this one UFO video that they posted, like, hey, saw something strange this morning or whatever. And like it has barely any views. And it's like very obvious that they're not making like bank making you know, fake hoaxy stuff. So that's
Well, that was why I found Bob Lazar so compelling and incredible. I watched his or that Jeremy Corbell documentary with him, and then I watched the Joe Rogan interview with him as well. And everything about Bob Lazar, it's just like the kids in the aerial school. It's like, I find you credible because you're exactly the sort of person who has no reason to lie. There's no, there's absolutely no benefit to you doing this. There's only detriment. And I think that that's the case. It's like if people are like you're talking about, like you got this video and okay, it's about 3 minutes of something.
yeah, it does not look good. It makes me look dumber, honestly, to bring it up a lot
That's
of the
yeah,
time.
like that's the thing too, is like we're all at this point. It's like when I edit something for social media, I make cuts that are less than a second sometimes. Our attention span is so short. So you could post an actual 3 minute video of a for real UFO, and it's like it does if it doesn't cut fast enough, no one's gonna watch it. You're gonna get 10 views and they're gonna be like, this crackpot over here.
Yeah,
you
right.
know?
Just by the association with the view count.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's ultimately it is an interesting, beautiful universe that we live in, and I'm excited to be a part of this game of life. I like this experience and all of its ups and downs and dynamicness. I think that it's really cool to be a human. And if this isn't our, you know, ultimate form, if we really are just consciousness, um, that seems great, but seems kind of boring if that's all that there is. So I like that we get to go through this crazy process, this experience of life. And
Even better, that's like taking off all the breaks because it's like, who cares? Which is lovely to do in theory and very difficult to do in practice, which is why it's good to remind yourself of the theory of it. Because yeah, it's like you have to reapply the theory. This is what the Wim Hof breathing does. It's like reapply the realization that you are only here to experience this every day, because every day you'll get lost in the sauce again and then forget that that's all you were ever doing to begin with, and you'll start to take it seriously.
yeah, yeah, I that resonates deeply with me. Just trying to have meaningful sensory experiences, using all your senses in like a really focused way, I guess, and feeling the relationships around you. I feel like that's what it's all about, the experience of life. So, I mean, it's all about other stuff too. But anyways, I feel as though, yeah, what you said absolutely rings true, that that's really what we're here to do. Every day is just to experience things and not to necessarily try. I mean, as humans, like, we want to modify our world all the time, but sometimes just accepting it as it is, and yeah, is the best thing you can possibly do. It's just to appreciate.
And appreciate that you're modifying it all the time, whether you want to or not, because we both have the impulse to like create it in our own image and to like hold on to what we create and never let it go. And it's both, you know.
Yeah. As someone who loves creation, it is hard for me to sometimes say just leave it as it is. So it is balancing both those things, but I think that's a beautiful point to wrap there, on that paradoxical kind of nature of things, to be
I
grateful and appreciate as it is, and to be okay with your contribution to it too.
Yes, you can be to just try to be grateful for your own frustrations of your own limits. That's the idea.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Quinn.
Thank you for having me.
This has been so fun, and
Yeah.
it really nourishes my my social life and my soul, and it's just nice to connect to another creator who's always pondering the deeper things about life. So I really, really did appreciate getting to go inside your mind for a moment and to converse about such a wide breadth of topics.
Well, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for the invite. First of all, I've wanted to be on a podcast for forever. So this is the fulfillment of a personal dream, because
Yes, this is the first one.
Yeah, of course it's my first podcast. Like, who else am I talking to? Just my dog. And thank you for like inviting me inside your brain, because when we met at the night market, like the thing that attracted me was that you had axolotl art and I had axolotl, and I'm like, okay, you're cool. You like axolotls. And I generally enjoyed your vibe, but like, that's what I love about meeting and connecting with other creatives, is it gives you the insight into a whole new universe of creativity. And I love being in your creative universe. Like, it's a very fun and magical place, I think.
I would like to see our worlds collide, honestly. I feel like your style and my style, I could see some of our characters standing side by side. So maybe
Absolutely.
it would be fun to somehow bring that into existence.
I hope we should collaborate in the future. I love that idea.
Yeah, it sounds super fun. You're Juno Birch, just like the claymation style of it, I feel like. I don't know if you can see him, but there's,
oh yeah, those guys. I've been
Astro
enjoying them from the beginning.
but like, yeah, her bright, imaginative style definitely, like, I feel like we're on a similar wavelength there with the hand sculpting stuff. So
Oh, I love hand sculpting. We could go on for hours.
We
Okay,
could.
I'm gonna have to focus. I gotta eat dinner.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, having a late dinner here. Sorry to hold you up there, but
No,
it's
I'm a
been
night
great
owl
talking.
anyway. Yeah, thank you so much, man. And let's just keep in touch. And I hope I see you in person soon.
Yes. And this concludes season 1 of Explorers Podcast. Thank you for giving it a tight wrap there on episode 10.
Yay!
And this will be a digital high five as kind of tradition. All right. Well,
all right.
I'll let you go.
Well, okay. I'll see you soon. Take care. Say hi to your cute bebe.
Will do. Bye, Quinn.
Bye.